The day my husband kissed me goodbye, I thought I was going to a routine medical checkup. I never imagined that by sunset, I'd be locked inside a psychiatric hospital, against my will, while the people I loved most were stealing my life. For 3 years, everyone believed I had lost my mind. My husband took my house, my family took my money, and the little girl who used to call me Mom was taught to fear me. But they made one mistake. They forgot that the truth has a way of escaping, even from behind locked doors. What happened next destroyed every lie they had built. My name is Ndidi Amaka Okwosa. Everyone calls me Ndidi. And before I tell you how I lost 3 years of my life, I need you to understand something. I was not a woman who trusted easily. I checked locks twice. I read contracts 3 times. I still lost everything to the man who slept beside me for 9 years. It started with my father. China Okwosa was not a rich man when I was a child. He drove a rusted Peugeot 504 and sold building materials in a small shop off Ogui Road in Enugu. By the time I was 34, that small shop had become 3 warehouses, a fleet of delivery trucks, and land in 4 states. My father built his empire with cracked hands and a stubborn refusal to trust banks with anything but the bare minimum. He used to say a bank was just a stranger holding your money with a smile on its face. When the cancer took hold of his lungs in the dry season, he called me to his bedside alone. My husband, Obumneme, was not in the room. My stepmother was not in the room. Just me, the smell of methylated spirit, and the machine that beeped beside him like a countdown he refused to acknowledge. Ndidi, he said, his voice thin as paper, I am not leaving this money to you. I remember the sting of that sentence more sharply than I remember his funeral. 34 years of being his only daughter, and in what I already suspected were his final weeks, he looked at me like a man handing over the last thing he owned to someone he trusted more than he trusted his own blood. You're leaving it to Munachiso. My daughter, 7 years old at the time, asleep at home with her dolls scattered across her bedspread, utterly unaware that her grandfather had just rewritten the future of our entire family from a hospital bed in Enugu. You will be her trustee, my father continued, gripping my wrist with more strength than I thought his body still had left in it. You will be her trustee. Until she turns 21, every kobo passes through your hands first, not your husband's, not your stepmother's, yours. He paused, and his eyes, cloudy with morphine, sharpened for just a moment, the way they used to sharpen over unpaid invoices. I have seen how men look at money that isn't theirs, Ndidi. I built this so no one can touch it unless they go through you. Guard her. Papa, you are frightening me. Good. Fear will keep you awake. Promise me. I promised. He made me say it again, slower, like a man testing whether a wall would hold weight before he leaned on it. I didn't understand then why he made me promise twice. 3 weeks later, he was gone, and 2 weeks after the burial, while I still wore black to the office out of habit, my husband asked to see the will. Obumneme Ezemma was by every outward measure a good husband. He remembered our anniversary before I did. He drove Muna to school every morning singing off-key to old fella records with the windows down, and she would sing back the wrong lyrics on purpose just to hear him laugh. Our neighbors in Lekki called us the golden couple. I called him my rock in the toast I gave at our 9th anniversary dinner, 4 months before he had me committed. I did not know that night that the woman refilling wine glasses at the far end of the table, introduced to me as my husband's new business partner, Chidera Anyanu, had already been inside my house 11 times that year. I did not know that she had memorized which drawer held my father's will, which cabinet held our marriage certificate, which folder held Munachiso's birth records. I did not know that she and my husband had begun meeting at a hotel in Victoria Island every Thursday evening, while I believed every single week that he was at his usual Thursday golf game. But what I did know, because he told me himself, was that Obumneme's construction business had been struggling. What he never told me, what I only pieced together much later from bank statements I should have demanded to see years earlier, was that it wasn't struggling, it was drowning. Loans taken against equipment he'd quietly sold, a 40 million naira contract in Abuja that collapsed after a government minister was reassigned, debts stacked on debts hidden behind a smile he practiced in our bathroom mirror every morning. My daughter's trust fund held over 1.2 billion naira, and he could not touch a single naira of it while I was alive, competent, and standing between him and that fortune, exactly as my father had designed. So he stopped trying to find a way around me. He decided to remove me instead. "It's just your annual physical," he said that Tuesday morning, straightening his tie in our bedroom mirror without quite meeting my reflection's eyes. I remember laughing, actually laughing at the strangeness of it. "Since when do I book my hospital appointments?" "Since I love you," he said, and kissed my forehead, the same kiss he'd given me 1,000 mornings before, except this one had an ending stitched inside it that I couldn't see yet. Looking back, I can name every lie folded into that sentence like creases in a shirt. I had not been forgetting things. I had been exhausted, grieving my father, running his warehouses because Obumneme insisted he didn't want to interfere in family business, raising a 7-year-old alone in every way that mattered, while wearing a wedding ring that was starting to feel like a leash. But exhaustion, dressed carefully in the right words by the right person, can look exactly like madness to anyone who has already decided they want to see it. Dr. Kelechi Mbakwe's private clinic sat behind gates so tall I couldn't see the building from the road, only jacaranda trees leaning over the wall like they were trying to escape too. A nurse I now know as Imfunaya Chukwama led me to a waiting room with soft lighting and softer music, the kind of room designed to make you forget you should be asking questions. I sat there for 40 minutes before 2 orderlies came for me, not a doctor, 2 large men in white scrubs holding a clipboard with my name already signed at the bottom of a voluntary admission form I had never seen in my life. "I didn't sign this," I said, my voice rising as they gripped my arms, gently at first, and then not. "Ma, your husband signed on your behalf. Power of attorney." The taller one said it like it was routine, like this happened every day. And God help me, it does. "Obumneme!" I screamed his name until my throat tore, until the sound of it stopped being a name and became just noise. He was standing in the hallway the entire time, arms folded, eyes wet, performing grief for an audience of orderlies who didn't care whether his tears were real. He didn't move to stop them. He didn't move at all. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was his phone buzzing in his hand. On the screen, a name I didn't recognize yet. Chidera. 3 kisses, 1 word. Done. If you've ever had someone you trusted decide quietly and completely that your voice no longer mattered, tell me in the comments. I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how far that kind of betrayal can travel. And if this is your first time here, subscribe now, because what happens to me over the next 3 years is only the beginning. Later, much later, I learned exactly what they had built against me, brick by careful brick. Dr. Mbakwe paid 4 million naira in 3 installments, backdated a file claiming I had been presenting with delusional episodes for 8 months. He forged signatures from a therapist who did not exist, invented session notes for appointment I never attended, and wrote that I believed people were stealing from me. An almost cruel joke, considering it was the truest thing I had ever said, and no one had believed me for it. Chidera Anyanwu, I would discover, did not simply orchestrate my husband's affair from the shadows. She drafted the psychiatric report herself in a font matching Dr. Mbakwe's letterhead and sat across from him in his office to make certain every clause aligned with exactly what the court would need to grant Obumneme emergency guardianship of Munachiso and, by extension, quiet control of her trust. Within 6 weeks of my admission, a family court judge, shown a stack of documents I never saw, never contested, never even told existed, granted my husband full legal guardianship of our daughter in the best interest of the minor, given the mother's current incapacity. 6 weeks, that is how long it took to erase 34 years of my life on paper. Chidera moved into my house. 4 months later, into my bedroom, into my daughter's bedtime stories. She started calling herself Mommy Chidera. Muna, 7 years old, and told over and over that her real mother was sick and dangerous and confused, began, slowly, the way children believe anything repeated with enough love in the voice, to believe it. I will not pretend the hospital was only a lie wrapped around a healthy woman. Some of what happened to me there was real damage, inflicted slowly, on purpose. I was kept sedated for the first 8 months, heavier doses than any genuine patient needed, prescribed by a doctor being paid handsomely to keep me quiet and compliant. When I tried to explain, calmly, that I had been committed under false pretenses, it was logged in careful cursive as paranoid ideation worsening. The more I insisted I was sane, the more the file insisted I wasn't. It is a trap with no visible exit built directly into its design. The only way to prove you are not crazy is to stop trying to prove it. I stopped insisting after the 2nd year, not because I gave up, because I learned that silence was the only currency that bought fewer injections and more freedom to move around the ward, to sit by the window, to watch the sky change color, and remind myself it was still the same sky over my daughter's house. That's when I met Ifunaya again, the nurse from the intake room, now rotated onto my ward. She remembered my face. She remembered, too, the day she'd been told to sign paperwork she never once saw a doctor actually review. Something about your file never sat right with me, she told me one evening, sliding a cup of untouched tea across the table during a supervised recreation hour, her voice low enough to disappear under the television noise. Dr. Mbakwe doesn't usually take private cases like yours himself. He's the owner. He doesn't see patients. It was the first thread. I pulled it slowly, over months, terrified to be wrong, more terrified to be right. Ifunaya began to smuggle out small things for me. Not weapons, not tools, but information which turned out to be far more dangerous to the people who'd put me there. A photocopied page of my admission file she accidentally left in the printer twice. A visitor log showing Chidera Anyao had signed in to see Dr. Mbakwe 6 times in the 2 weeks before my commitment, long before she was ever introduced to me as my husband's business partner. And one evening, she brought me something that nearly stopped my heart in my chest. A torn corner of letterhead, my father's company seal half visible on it, my father's estate, in the psychiatrist's trash. I wrote to Barrister Chinoson Ejiofun 11 times before one letter finally reached him. He had been my father's lawyer for over 20 years, the man who drafted the trust that named me guardian, the man my father trusted with details he wouldn't even share with me. 10 of my letters, I now believe, were intercepted, likely by staff paid to flag and quietly destroy anything addressed to lawyers, judges, or journalists. The 11th reached him only because Ifunaya walked it to a post office herself on her one day off that month, using her own money for the postage. 3 weeks later, Barrister Ejiofun visited the hospital under the guise of a routine legal consultation, something the facility couldn't easily refuse without raising questions it didn't want asked. I remember sitting across from him in a visitation room with a camera blinking red in the corner, forcing myself to speak slowly, calmly, sanely,
terrified that one wrong tremor in my voice would be logged against me forever. "Your father left instructions," he said quietly, sliding a folder half an inch towards me, careful not to let the camera catch the movement. "Ndidi, that investigation was supposed to happen 3 years ago. It never reached me. Someone buried the notification." "Who?" I whispered, my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake. He hesitated, the way a man hesitates when he already knows an answer he doesn't want to say out loud. "The court clerk who processed your husband's guardianship petition was transferred to a new post 2 months later. New car, new house in Magodo." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I finished it in my head, over and over for the rest of that night. It was Barrister Ejiofun who told me the truth that broke something open in my chest, the truth I had been circling around for months without ever quite seeing it.
"There's something else," he said. And for the first time in 20 years of knowing him, I watched him struggle to find words. "Chidera Ayawu, I need you to understand where she comes from before you hear the rest from someone crueler than me. My father, in 1998, had a daughter with a woman in Owerri, a relationship he ended before I was even born, a child he supported quietly, financially, but never once publicly claimed. He paid her school fees through a proxy account for years. He never told my stepmother. He never told me. He carried it silently into a grave I had cried over, believing I knew every corner of the man inside it. That daughter was Chidera. She grew up 20 minutes from warehouses that bore her own father's name, watching from the outside a family she wasn't allowed to belong to. She learned eventually exactly who Obiechina Okwosa was to her, and exactly what he'd left behind for a granddaughter she'd never once been introduced to, in a will that didn't so much as whisper her name. She didn't seduce my husband by accident. She found him first, struggling, drowning in debt, married to the woman who'd inherited everything Chidera believed should have included her from the beginning. What began as a private, festering resentment toward a father who erased her became a calculated partnership with a man who needed exactly what she wanted gone, me. I sat in that visitation room and felt the last 3 years rearrange themselves into a shape I finally understood. Chidera hadn't just stolen my husband. She had spent years quietly avenging herself against a dead man, using my daughter as the instrument. And the cruelest part, Munachiso, without knowing it, was calling her own aunt Mommy. It took 4 more months to build a case strong enough that no forged file could survive it. Ifunanya recorded Dr. Mbakwe on her phone, hidden in her uniform pocket, during a conversation where he referenced the Ezenua arrangement and complained openly that Obumnemi was late on the final payment. Barrister Ejiofor found the original wire transfers, 3 of them, from an account linked to Chidera's construction supply company, under Dr. Mbakwe's clinic under label consulting fees. He tracked down the court clerk in Magodo, who, faced with an anti-corruption investigator and the very real threat of losing his new house, gave a signed statement admitting he'd suppressed the 90-day notification for 800,000 naira. And on a Tuesday morning, almost identical to the one that had ended my old life, 2 different men in uniform walked into Dr. Mbakwe's clinic, this time with a court order for my discharge and an arrest warrant carrying his name on it. I walked out of that building on my own legs for the first time in 3 years, and the morning air felt like something I had to relearn how to breathe. I did not call ahead. I stood at the gate of my own house, my father's money, my name still on half of the documents, no matter what forged guardianship papers claimed otherwise. and I watched, through the bars, as Chidera Yawo hung wet laundry in my garden, my hibiscus, her hands. Munachiso was in the yard, 10 years old now, taller, her hair braided in a style I didn't recognize, laughing at something she said. My daughter's laugh in someone else's garden because of someone else's lie. I did not run to her. 3 years of careful survival had taught me that the wrong move, even now, could still be twisted into erratic behavior by people desperate enough to try. I stood at that gate with Barrister Ejiofor beside me and a folder of evidence thick enough to end 2 careers and 1 marriage, and I said quietly, "Muna." She turned. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who resembles someone from an old photograph, searching, uncertain, a flicker of something underneath, something that might have been memory trying to surface. "Munachiso Chidera," she said slowly. "Who is that?" And Chidera, to her credit, or perhaps simply because she finally understood that the folder in my lawyer's hands meant the end of everything she'd built, she went very still, wet cloth dripping in her hands, and said nothing at all. The case moved faster than anyone expected once the clerk's confession became public record. Dr. Mbakwe lost his license before he lost his freedom. Obumneme's construction company, already hemorrhaging money for years, collapsed entirely under the weight of legal fees and public disgrace. Lagos society, I learned, is unforgiving toward men exposed for locking their wives away to steal from their own daughters. I sat across from him once, only once, before the final hearing, not out of forgiveness, out of a need to look at him and understand how 9 years of marriage could hold so little weight against 40 million naira in collapsed contracts. He told myself, "You'd be taken care of," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Good hospital, good doctors. I told myself it wasn't really. "Don't," I said. "Don't tell yourself anything else in front of me. Save it for the judge." He didn't get the house. He didn't get Muna. He served 11 months before a plea deal on the fraud and unlawful confinement charges, a sentence I still believe was far too short for 3 stolen years. But Barrister Ejiofor reminded me that Nigerian courts move slowly, and I had already learned more patience than any woman should ever have to. Chidera received a lighter sentence, and something I hadn't expected to see from her. The first time she spoke in court, she didn't defend herself. She looked at me and said only, "I only wanted what was supposed to be mine too." I did not answer her. I understood her in a way I never expected to. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness. Munachiso is 13 now. It took almost a year of quiet dinners, rebuilt trust, and one very patient therapist before she called me mom again without hesitating first, without that half-second flicker of checking herself. I run my father's company myself now. 3 warehouses grew to 7, because grief, it turns out, makes excellent fuel when you point it in the right direction. I kept Ifunaya close. She left nursing 18 months ago to manage patient advocacy for my father's foundation, the one I built specifically to investigate wrongful psychiatric commitments across 3 states. We have overturned 9 cases since we started. 9 other women, other husbands, other forged files, other locked doors, finally pried open. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying silent for so long in that hospital. I tell them the truth. I didn't survive by staying silent. I survived by waiting for the exact moment my silence would stop protecting them and start destroying them instead. My father used to say the truth has a way of escaping, even from behind locked doors. He was right. It just needed someone patient enough to let it out. If this story moved you the way it moved me to finally tell it, subscribe to Stories by Abby and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Stories like mine deserve to be heard, and there are more waiting for you every week.